Hello and welcome to the More Confidence with Luna Gaia podcast. I am your host, Lunaria Gaia, and here we talk all things body image, self-esteem, your thinking in your mind. How do you connect true to you in every part of who you are? I want you to know that all of you is welcome, so sit back and relax and listen to today's episode. Sending you love. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 133 of the More Confidence with Luna Gaia podcast. I love having you around. I love my listeners, I love my watchers on YouTube, wherever you're listening, however you are tuning in. I want you to know how much I really value you. I honestly do, and I love hearing from you as well. If you send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, or even on any of the other platforms, if you comment, if you send me a message on my WhatsApp, send me an email, I love hearing from you. I'd love to know your thoughts. I want to know what your experiences are and how life is going for you as a result of my work. I always love to hear from you. So please feel welcome to reach out on any of those platforms. Maybe even come see me live, follow me on the socials, any of that kind of stuff. Have you read my book? I'm so curious as to whether or not you are a reader. Maybe you've listened to it on Audible. Maybe you read it rather on Kindle. Maybe you've got it in the flesh. If you haven't already, it's Perfectly Imperfect, your complete guide to loving yourself and loving your body. And when I say your complete guide to loving yourself and loving your body, I freaking mean it. In more ways than you could ever possibly imagine. If you implement everything that I've written in that book, it's going to change your freaking life. It really, really will. But for today, on episode 133, I'm going to be talking about boundaries. And here's something, a framework that I want to give you that works every time. It works every time when you're setting boundaries. You may be clunky in the beginning, and I want you to know that. But if you're not very good at saying no, even if you do say no, you're not very good at following through and holding on to that no, or you're a little bit of a people pleaser, then this is the episode for you. That's what you got to know, that this beautiful, wonderful ride that we call life becomes way easier when you learn how to communicate effectively. Saying no doesn't have to be a big, scary, oh my God, I'm now in conflict and people are going to think badly about me. When you communicate effectively your boundaries, people actually respect you more because you respect you more. And people often don't even notice that a boundary is being set because of the way that you articulately and delicately and skillfully deliver the boundary. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode, on how do you get to a point where you can skillfully deliver your boundaries, say no, ask for what you need. I mean, I can't give you everything in this one short podcast episode, and I do have a course, Babes with Boundaries, coming up. It is an absolute hoot. 6 weeks online. I give you everything that you could possibly need to know about setting boundaries, including role plays, including the insecurities. How do I deal with the guilt? All of that is part of Babes with Boundaries course. So if you are curious about that, by all means, let me know. It's coming around May-ish at this point in time. So it's in the future pipeline, but it is coming at some point. So for those of you who are curious, May 2023, about that, maybe even a little bit later in the year, is when it's going to roll out. So tell me what it's like for you in your communication. Because I know that for majority of my clients, certainly majority of my life, I was a poor communicator. Not because I didn't know how to listen very well, but because I felt insecure about talking about my needs. I didn't know that it was okay for me to say no. I didn't know how to feel comfortable in delivering my needs and my wants. I actually didn't even know that it was okay for me to have my own needs and wants met. And if I did communicate those things, I was often seen as a bitch. Or I was told that I was bossy, or I wasn't called a leader, I was called bossy. Someone's got Miss Bossy Boots on. Something like that. So the mindset shift around setting our boundaries is one thing, and I highly recommend going back and listening to other podcast episodes, because when you build your confidence in your self-esteem and your self-worth, you are more likely to be able to set more effective boundaries. So highly recommend you going and checking out those before. Well, not before, actually. It's not a prerequisite for today's conversation. But if you are struggling with the self-esteem sort of side of things, go check out other episodes on how to build your self-esteem, on how to love yourself more, how to change your mindset and the way that you think. And then use the tools that I'm sharing in today's episode as well. because they're going to be amazing. That's reality. Like, it's an incredible skill. It's a lifelong skill. When we can communicate effectively, our relationships with people become a lot more healthy. How many times have you or someone you know been asked, how are you? And you go, I'm fine. How many times have you heard that maybe in regular programming? You know, you're watching the TV or there's a story that's happening in a film, and the woman typically is what it says is, I'm fine, when she's actually fuming. How many times in your life have you not spoken up when things were small? So, you know, like that was a little bit of an overstep. Okay, it's fine. I'll let them get away with it. It's all good. I don't want to cause a fuss. I don't want to upset the apple cart. I don't want to disturb the peace. And then they do it again, or they do something else. And, you know, 1, 2, 5, 10 times later, you're so frustrated that you explode. And what happens in that moment when you don't set boundaries early and then later on you explode, you won't get taken seriously. They'll think you're in a mood. If you're a woman, they'll think that you've got your period. They will blame it on hormones. They will think that you're just stressed. They won't actually take the outburst seriously. They might for the moment. They might be like, oh, I'm going to stay clear of her for a little while. But anything that you say in those moments when you are having an outburst won't be taken seriously for the long term. Things will calm down for a few days or maybe a week or so, but then the old behavior is going to come back because all they're doing is reacting to your reaction. There's no behavior change that's happened, and all they're getting is an emotional outburst. And the emotional outburst the emotional outburst rarely leads to a resolution. Rarely leads to a resolution. So what's important for you to remember here when we go into this boundaries framework is as best as possible, you want to set boundaries early. Like, the earlier the better. Have the conversation. I was talking to a friend of mine just the other day who's dating, maybe has been seeing someone for about a month. And they had said to me that I'm getting nothing from this person that I'm dating in between our dates. Like, when we're together, it's great. We're having so much good times. It's beautiful. We're connecting. Like, we get along so well. We have heaps in common. But in between our dates, I'm not getting anything from them. And I was like, oh, cool. Have you asked? Have you asked them to send you more messages or to communicate better between your dates? And she said, well, no, isn't it a bit early? Isn't it a bit early to be calling out behavior from that perspective, right? Quote, calling out behavior. And I said, look, I think that clear is kind. It's actually one of the steps in the frameworks to be as clear as possible. So I'm giving you some hints and some previews there. The clearer that we can be with what we need from one another, the better, right? Because if right now at this point, a month into the dating, I wouldn't even call it a relationship, but a month into the dating, if you ask for what you need, something relatively small, like, hey, I'd like to hear from you more regularly or something like that, and they're not willing to do that at all, and there's no room for negotiation, and there's like a blanket no dismissal of your needs, then you know early on to get the hell out of there. Because if someone can't show up for your needs in a small way in the early days, particularly when you're typically in a relationship, in the beginning, that's where people are trying to impress one another. If you can't even show up now in a small way, you're not going to show up later to the big stuff. So the earlier on you can to set boundaries, the better. Because you're setting the tone. You are setting the scene. You are establishing with the other person, this is how I need to be treated and this is what is important to me. And if they can't do that, then that's a whole nother conversation, right? The conversation then lends itself to, maybe I'll need to do another podcast episode about that, about what to happen when people will not respect your boundaries. The short answer of not respecting boundaries is that if you've set a really good framework in the beginning, which is what I'm about to show you, if you've set a really good framework in the beginning and you've agreed upon certain things And when that person doesn't follow through with what they said that they would do, and you hold them accountable for it, and they keep doing that again and again and again, and you keep coming to them and say, hey, the thing's still not happening, even though you've agreed to do it, then the conversation changes to, we need to get out of this relationship. Honestly, and I know that might seem really extreme, but we teach people how to treat us by what we allow. If we keep going down a path that says it's okay for you to treat me poorly, it's okay for you to say no, it's okay for you to break your promises around me, and there's no consequences to that, why would anybody change their behavior? The reality is they're not going to. Simply put, people will treat you the way that you let them. And now I'm not talking extreme circumstances here whereby you're walking down the street and somebody punches you, or a random assault. Over time, small boundaries get crossed and therefore bigger ones are allowed to be crossed. That's the ones that I'm talking about here. I'm talking that the early in the piece, when we've allowed somebody to treat us poorly on repeat, that ends up becoming the habit. And I do this with new friendships all the time. I'm setting new parameters within my relationships. It doesn't have to be big or formal, or I'm sitting down and having a boundaries conversation with you. I'm going to show you the framework around that to do it when it's formal. But it's even the informal kind of stuff. It's the very informal, everyday sort of boundaries that I encourage you to practice on a regular basis. So, for example, I threw a party on the weekend. And there were people in my house that I've never really met before, that I've met kind of like a friend of a friend kind of vibe. I live in a small town. I tend to invite strangers, and those strangers can become friends. Now, I know them in some way, shape, or form. They're connected somewhere. It's not a large city stranger kind of party. Like, there's 20 odd people there, right? So everybody I know, like I have a chance to have an intimate conversation with them. It's not a free-for-all, not by any stretch of the imagination. And we were singing some songs. And having a really grand time singing some songs, playing piano. And one of the people at my party, I had gotten to a certain chord, and it's 11 o'clock at night. I've been playing for hours, a few champagnes under my belly. And I said, oh, no, I can't play that song right now. It's got too many like A sharp minors and B flat minors and that kind of stuff. And they had said the first time, oh, no, but that's easy. It's just, those three notes. Just play that. And they said something the first time in a group setting. I was like, nah, can't do it. Too hard basket, move on. And then it happened again, right? So to me, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So I generally am pretty generous the first time someone makes a small slight against me, like a small boundary cross. I tend to be pretty cool with it the first time, right? I handle it in the sense I was like, nah, I'm cool. That was me shutting it down and setting a boundary very informally. The second time that it happened, of like, oh no, it's easy. They said to me, it's easy. Just play X, Y, Z, right? I'm the one playing the piano. I'm the one singing most of the songs. I'm reading most of the songs. Everyone's singing along with me. Pretty hectic. It's a pretty hectic skill to be able to have. I've developed it over 4 years. I will continue to develop that skill, and I'm super proud of myself for being able to do that in a group setting. And so when this person had said it the second time, or something along those lines the second time, my immediate response was something along the lines of, I'm not yet skilled enough to play those without thinking about it. Would you like to play them? Right? And the answer was, oh, I don't play piano. Right? And I was like, oh, okay, on another instrument. They go, yeah, guitar. And I said, there's a guitar. Would you like to play on the guitar? And they said, oh, I'm a bit rusty. And I was like, okay, cool. So do you want to play on the guitar or the piano, or would you like me to do it? She goes, oh, no, you can do it. I was like, great. I can't play A sharp minor without thinking about it. So I'm going to scrap it. Now, that might sound a little confrontational in a party setting. It was just like, it wasn't necessarily a challenge. What I want you to notice here is that my tone was pretty curious. Like, oh, A sharp minor is easy. Just play A sharp minor. Sweet. I can't do that. Do you want to? No, I can't do it. Okay, cool. On another instrument? No, I can't do it. Okay, cool. So I'm not going to play A sharp minor, I'm going to skip it. I kept it quite straightforward from that perspective because what I was showcasing in those moments, it's a really, polite's not the correct word. It is a a friendly way to say, do you want to do it instead of me? Can you do it any better than me? Effectively is what I'm saying. If you can't do it any better than me, then shut your pie hole. Right? That's how I was feeling in that moment. But I also know that that's not going to get a very good result when setting a boundary. If I just meet her with aggression, like I said to you before, all that's going to happen is that now I'm going to have an awkwardness between us. It's not necessary. But I can still set the boundary really effectively. And I set the boundary really effectively by being curious and offering an invitation. Cool, I can't play our shape minor like that. I can't play it automatically without thinking about it, which is what was required for the party that we were doing. I needed to play chords that I was super familiar with so I can do them fast while I'm singing in front of a group of people. That particular chord or a series of particular chords, I'm not yet skilled enough to do that. You may even notice with this as well is that my ego didn't get in the way. I wasn't offended by the fact that she thought that it was going to be easy for me to play A sharp minor, and it's not easy for me to play A sharp minor, whatever the chord was. I'm not upset about it because I have nothing to prove at all. I'm not insecure about that. It's okay for me to be a beginner. I don't mind the fact that I can't play everything under the sun excellently right now. I'm okay with that. I'm pretty stoked that I could play what I could play for as long as I did. People effectively just throwing songs at me and me playing them. Just in chords, just basically. But I was really stoked that I could do that. So what I want you to notice here is that when you don't have any buttons being pushed, you don't need to react emotionally, which is one of the key things to setting boundaries. I didn't react emotionally because I wasn't upset about it. I wasn't offended by her questions. I needed to set the boundary because there was a dismissal of the complexity to which I was already doing. So I did that. So let me break down kind of what happened here. In terms of any kind of boundary that we are setting, and I'm going to keep it simple, as in a request to keep our shoes outside. But you can use this framework on any boundary that you are setting, in any small or very large kind of setting. That could be with your friends and family, it could be with your children. This works really well with children, by the way, too. But also with your partners, it can happen at work. Anybody that you come across in any kind of situation whereby there is a conflict of someone's behavior isn't the way that you want it to be, and that a need isn't being met there that you need to communicate about. That's super important. That's a super important skill because otherwise you get resenty, maybe you get narky, maybe you'll say something like, oh, it's fine, no, just, okay, fine. Under your breath, say, fine, just leave your shoes there, right? Like my friend with the person that they're dating. I said, well, why don't you just go ahead and say something to this person? Oh, but surely it's too soon. Nah, it's not. Give the feedback. Clear is kind. Because people love, in general, people love hearing how they can be a better friend or a better lover or a better boss or a better teammate. People love hearing specifically how they can do it better. And not from a judgment point of view. This isn't like you're doing it wrong. This is what I would really love. So let me show you, because the way that we do this is so crafted skillfully that when you practice repeat, so maybe save this podcast, download it onto your phone, leave a rating as well on the podcast. That would be lovely. I would appreciate that so very much on your Spotify or on your Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening. Leave me a review so other people can have access to it. Save this, because when you communicate effectively, life gets better all the time. So framework number 1 when you are doing any of this is consent. Now, it sounds a bit weird. It might sound a little bit out of place. But have you ever tried to have a difficult conversation with someone and they're not in the mood for it? Or they've just come home from work, or they're stressed? Or even vice versa. Have you ever tried to has someone else trying to have a difficult conversation with you and you're not in the mood for it? You don't have the headspace right now. You've got too much going on. Consent is important. And really, that's as simple as saying, hey, can we have a potentially awkward conversation about XYZ? Is now a good time? And then the person can go, ooh, okay, right. So I would use either courageous conversation, awkward conversation. I'm bringing some playfulness here while also keeping it real. Hey, I want to have a bit of a conversation about us respecting each other around the house. Is now a good time to have a chat about that? And that might seem really formal, but what it's doing is allowing the other person to opt out right now. And that shows respect, right? So when we respect the other person, they're more likely to respect us. We're creating a framework of respect straight off the bat. So that's the first one. I want you to create consent and say, hey, is now a good time to have this conversation? They're either going to say yes or no. If they say yes, you say great, and then you would carry on with this methodology. If not, you go, okay, cool, I totally understand that. When would be a good time for you in the next 24 hours to have the conversation? There's a very good reason why it's in the next 24 hours. I want to say 48 tops, but I actually want to keep it cleaner than that. You want to make it as soon as possible after the event that is happening, right? Not when you're heightened in like an emotional state, but if you're like, cool, we can't talk about it for another 3 weeks, the intensity of it is dissipated and you've probably forgotten a lot of it. So it's important for you to like, if you can, I appreciate that life gets in the way sometime, but if it's possible, can we talk about it within the next 24 hours? And it's going to be dependent on how serious the boundary is, right? But still, like, can we talk about it the next day or so? Is a less formal way to say 24 hours, right? So say, if they say no, okay, great, totally get it. Can we make some time in the next 24 hours? Can we make some time in the next day or so? When is a good time for you to do it in the next day or so? I'm asking very direct questions here, asking them to come to me. I'm asking them to come forward with it, right? This is an important factor. Their consent and their buy-in to the conversation is going to help you hold the boundary later on. It's actually supporting you to do that. Number 2 here, like I've said, be direct. Clear is kind. It's not like, okay, so the other day I was thinking about blah, and I was talking to Jenny about this actually, and she was talking about her husband and how she feels about this and blah, 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 blah. No, be direct. Clear is kind here. So what you want to do is say, say we're talking about leaving our shoes outside in the house. You could say, great, I'm glad that now's a good time to talk. So it's important to me that our household is nice and clean and tidy because it really helps me to concentrate. It helps the flow of life be much more straightforward. And I feel really loved and respected when our household is clean. It's really important to me. Does that make sense? And get them to confirm, right? Do you know what I mean by that? Yes, I do know what you mean by that. Cool. And then the next part I say, I would like if we could leave our shoes outside so it doesn't drag mess through the house. Is that possible for you? Notice what I did there. I would like to have XYZ outcome. Is that possible for you? Can we do that? Would that be able to work for you? I'm directly asking them a question, but I haven't said, it really shits me when you leave your shoes on and drag mud through the house. It's not what I'm saying. I framed it that it's important to me that we live in a clean and tidy house for these reasons, and I feel loved and respected when we have a clean house. Then I've asked for confirmation that they understand that. Yes, great, cool. Now the second part is, I would like XYZ. Is that possible for you? So I've effectively told them how I'm feeling about a situation. I'm not talking about them or their behavior. How I feel about the situation. And then I am moving into speaking directly what I'm asking for and then asking them if that's possible. Now, with a request like this, it's pretty likely to be a yes, right? If it's a no, and if it's a straight up no, we need to have a different conversation, which I'm not going to get into in today's conversation. But if they're like, yeah, look, I think that that's possible. There might be a little bit of back and forward, to toing and froing, but you could just say they get to the point, they're like, yeah, I think that's possible. They might turn around and say, I forget a lot. Can we put a note by the door? to remind me. Something like that. Okay, great. Can do. But I don't want you to leave it there. This is what most people do. Most people leave their boundaries of, can you do this? The other person says yes, and then it's done. You need to go one step further than that. There's actually a couple of steps, but this next step is absolutely critical for you setting up a boundary framework that actually works for you when the boundary gets crossed later. We're all human, boundaries gets crossed again. We don't necessarily mean to, but I want to set you up for success so that when the boundary gets crossed, you're going to be able to reaffirm it. So just say the person says, yeah, I'm happy to absolutely leave my shoes outside or on the rack or whatever it is. Take our shoes off inside. Cool. And then I would say, thank you so much. That would just really ease my mind and make me feel really loved and respected. Thank you for that. So I'm confirming and reaffirming how I feel when that happens, so I feel loved and respected, right? So I'm implying and inferring to the other person that they're going to love and respect me by doing that. That's the first piece there. The second piece is that I'm thanking and validating them for doing it, right? I feel loved and respected. Thank you so much. It's going to make me feel so much better, right? I am rewarding the behavior I want to see in the other person. And then what I'm going to say is, so on the off chance that it doesn't happen, what do you think that we should do? Notice what I did here. I presupposed that it might not happen. And then I asked a question about what happens if it does. And I asked them to come up with a solution. It's pretty likely they're going to go, I don't know. Right? And then I'm going to press them a little bit and say, they say, I don't know. Go, okay, cool. So, because I think we're both in agreement, right, that we're going to keep the shoes outside. Yes, cool. I want to make sure that we can hold each other accountable to that if that doesn't happen. So I would love to know what would be the best way to approach you if it doesn't happen. And then I can tell you for me. And then you're asking them to work for it, to tell you what the consequences are if they don't do it. They might go, well, I think that if you just said, babe, you left your shoes out again, then that would work. And I'm like, okay, cool. And when would you like me to say that? As soon as I've noticed? What kind of tonality would you like me to do it in? How do you best want me to do it? And get them to answer that for you so that you know exactly how it is to hold them accountable, right? And then you might say, cool, and I know that you hate me nagging and I hate nagging too, and I never want to feel like we're nagging in this relationship. If it happened more than once, how do you think we should approach that? Notice what I'm doing here again. I'm framing what's going to happen. If you keep not doing it, I don't want to be a nag. You don't want me to nag you. So how do I do that? And get them to tell you. And then you're going to reiterate everything, right? So step 1 is get consent. Step 2 is to be direct. Communication is like clear is kind. Number 3 is ask them to set the consequences. And then what you're going to do as step number 4 here is to reiterate the whole conversation back to them. Okay, great. So let me just confirm this. What I'm hearing is that we both agree that we're going to keep our shoes outside from now on. Is that right? Yes. Okay, cool. And if we don't keep our shoes, if that doesn't happen, then what you would like me to do is to tell you right away. Is that right? Yes. Cool. In a certain time. Yes, that's right. Cool. And if it happens regularly and you don't want to be nagged and I don't want to be nagged, you want me to do X, Y, Z. Is that right? Yes. Okay, cool. So I think that that's pretty clear. So this is what's going to happen from now onwards. Is that right? Yes. Okay, great. Is there anything else that we want to say to make this situation feel any more complete? No, I'm good. No, I'm good. Thanks, honey. Kiss. Get on with it, right? Then when it happens, if the shoes do get left outside, then you would follow through with the protocol that you've both already agreed on. The consent here matters because then they've got buy-in. So if they turn around and go, oh, honey, why are you telling me that? You can simply say something along the lines of, I remember having the conversation with us and we were talking about how this is the way that you wanted me to do it. Has something changed for you? Again, you're asking them. You're not putting it on them, but you are engaging them in the conversation. They're not in trouble. They've done nothing wrong. You guys agreed upon something. You are holding them accountable to that agreement by asking if anything has changed. And if it has, go through the steps again. until you reach the consequences part again, where you can then change it. If you do this on repeat in all of your conversations, wherever you're going when it comes to boundaries, you can keep it simple. It doesn't have to go on for hours or days or anything like that. You can do that very quickly. That is going to revolutionize the way that you see your experiences with other people, your conversations, and your ability to be able to hold your friends, your family, your loved ones accountable, as well as yourself. Because throughout that conversation, you could be like, well, what happens when I don't fulfill that? This is what's going to happen, X, Y, Z. That is the boundaries framework that I want to share with you on today's podcast, episode 133. Again, I love hearing from you. So let me know your feedback. How has this landed for you? If you are curious about Babes with Boundaries, shoot me through a message. I'll put you on the shortlist so that I can get in contact with you when the course is ready to go. It'll be online, so anybody all over the world can attend that training. Time zones will, of course, be in Australia because that's where I am right now. But that means that all the calls are recorded so you can have access to them irrelevant of where you are in the world. My name is Lunaria Guy. It is a pleasure to have you here on the More Confidence with Luna Guy podcast, and I'm wishing you very happy, very healthy boundaries. Big love. If you haven't already, I would love for you to like and subscribe, follow, and maybe leave a review so that other people know how to find this awesome podcast too.